30 minutes of power.
Welcome to 30 Minutes of Power, a podcast dedicated to educate, encourage, and inspire godly people to use their power to empower others. Join your hosts, Jori O'Neale and the coauthor, as they share powerful insights on how you can use your God-given talents and gifts to make a positive impact in the world. Welcome to another lovely episode of 30 Minutes of Power, TOP, your one-stop shop for all things encouraging, inspiring, motivating, and entertaining. It's your girl, Jori O'Neale, and I have the lovely Rachel Rector with me today. We are going to be discussing some very personal things, okay? So if you're listening, I want you to make sure that you're in a calm place. I want you to sit down, take a moment to really receive what's about to be shared. But I'm going to, and Rachel doesn't know this, I'm going to ask her about her journey from classroom teacher to now podcasting, book writing, entrepreneur, like all the things. And we're going to learn from her because I'm still in this season of transition. We're going to learn from her how she do it, what not to do, and where she is now, and kind of a look back as to maybe 2 or 3 things that she can encourage anyone listening here who is looking to transition from where they are to where God is calling them to go. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what's easy, what's comfortable, what's right. It's about, have you been called to something greater? And I think for me, for a long time, I hadn't done anything concerning moving from education because I didn't feel called. But amen. I've been called. And so now I'm trying to be obedient. It's been baby steps over the last 3 years, really doing the inner work to now move outwardly. So I'm excited to have Rachel with me. We became friends real quick earlier this year, honestly. And that was a story in itself. Maybe we'll share a little bit about that. But Rachel, it is such an awesome privilege to have you with me today. Super excited to jump into your story. Before we do, you want to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you're here?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. First of all, why am I here is because Jori and I got the privilege of co-authoring a book together. That is more the end of my journey into the present. And we got to celebrate together, not once, but twice. And it was in that meeting that I quickly learned I want to know this lady. We have a little side joke going in the bathroom that we were supposed to use. We're go there because I feel like we should go there. You had to put a code, and for whatever reason, that code didn't like me. So Jori always just had like a little side joke with me going on, and it's been an amazing journey with her because is just a sister from another mother and, of course, a sister in Christ. And so I just feel like kindred spirits connected right away. Little bit about myself. I, at the age of 6 years old, had an amazing first grade teacher. And from there, I thought, okay, I'm going to teach. I'm going to retire a teacher. I want to be a kindergarten teacher. This is what I'm going to do for life. And so I pursued that. I became a kindergarten teacher for 2 years. And then I turned into an English language learners teacher, which at the time was my dream job. I loved it because I got to reach all different parts of the world. I had people from all continents, and I loved just seeing them light up, learning how to read and learning how to write, but mostly being able to communicate non-verbally at first because they didn't have the language to verbally, and then just being able to make friendships and just feel seen and like they belonged. And so that was my dream job. And then insert couple years in, we had our first child, and I remember getting off of maternity leave and going back, and I was excited. I was one of those and never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I never wanted to be a homeschool mom. This is what I was going to do for life. I was going to be a teacher. And I remember we went through a couple bad daycares, and one was in home. And basically, she was giving my daughter Tylenol instead of milk because she thought she was teething, and my daughter was just screaming because she was hungry. And we pulled her and put her into another daycare, and very quickly, she kept getting bit. She was an early mover and an early talker, and so she was all over the place while the rest of the ones in her room were just babies that just laid there. And a toddler had came in, and not once but multiple times you could count how many teeth the child had by my daughter's face. And so we had to pull her. And I remember I didn't want to break my teaching contract because that was my dream. And my husband was amazing, shifted everything. Basically, we were ships in the night. We saw each other for an hour, said hello, goodbye, quickly updated each other, and then he went off to work for the night, and I was home with her, and that was just how it was. And I remember getting texts when he would be home with her and be like, "Oh, look what she's doing. Oh, look what she's saying." Because my daughter talked at like 4 or 5 months. It was crazy. Like she did, and she still does. And I remember being like, God, I am here raising everybody else's kids while I'm worried and people are raising my own child and I'm missing out on so much. And it was so hard because I was at the job that I wanted and I had landed that job and I loved that job and I worked for 2 schools, preschool through 5th grade. I got the best of every world. I got the little bitties that were like soaking it all in, and then I got the 5th graders that you could joke with and just, you could really talk about life in the world and creation. And it was a struggle. And I had 2 principals. I had a director, and they did not want me to leave. And in the end, the director understood. But it was hard because I'm an extrovert. And so to go home to a baby, yes, she talked early. I think that was a blessing from the Lord because I'm a talker. But it's different talking to a child and talking to adults. And so I had to shed all these identities, and I had all these identity
Wow.
yeah. And it was in those moments along the way, I switched to subbing so I could still have my foot in that door, but was mostly home with her. And it was in all of that that I just got lost in it all as a mom. That's what I was. I was mom. That's the only thing. And I remember meeting a coach and a speaker, and I remember her talking, and she's like, "What lights you up?" I didn't know. Outside of being a mom, I didn't know. And so it was in that I went to an event, and that's where God got a hold of me. And he says, "You can be a mom and you can be home, but you can be doing so much more. I put those gifts inside of you." Not to sit dormant. There are times, and I feel like there are times when, yes, maybe mom role, that is the best role. I always say being a mom, and I eventually did for a year and a half become a homeschool mom. I think those were the hardest jobs I've ever had, truthfully. And I've had some very excellent jobs, but it was in that moment that's where I learned, like, I love to write. I had professors in college that would tell me that, man, you should go into English. And I remember I was one of those, I'm going for 4 years and only 4 years. I'm not getting my master's. And so I didn't because it would add a 5th year to me. Right. Well, hindsight, I did go for 4 years. I did get my master's. And down the road now, I'm like, I love to write. And so I got the blessing, as you can see behind me, I got the blessing to co-author a chapter in More Than Enough. And then I got to write my own book this year, which was wild and crazy and wonderful. And now hopefully I can say this on air, I actually get to write for Christianity.com. And it's a joy because it's all different things. It's not the struggle in a good way of writing your own book and your own testimony, but I'm sharing biblical things and things that are in the world, but then I go back to the Bible. And so it's been a journey. I'm still learning. I feel like you're always becoming, God's always calling you to more. He doesn't want you to stay stagnant, but it's been a journey. You can ask me more, but yeah, it's been a journey. I love it. I actually got into being a one-on-one business coach and for a marketing school. And I was also a partnership coordinator. And if you would have asked me, Jori, years ago, I would never, ever, ever thought, because before that, I was in network marketing. I would never thought I would be in sales of any kind. And I never would have thought business. But it's been amazing.
Wow. Okay. So usually when I ask people to tell us a little bit about yourself, they tell a little bit, but I love you went deep. You went down. You out wide, deep. It was great. I have so many questions. And none of these are on my list of questions to ask you. I think probably the first question that I want to ask was what was that feeling like when you knew that you had to leave the classroom?
To me, I mourned it because I
Mm.
loved it. I did. I truly loved it. And I did want to be home with my daughter. Obviously, that was the ultimate reason why I left, but I mourned it. I remember nursing her and changing diapers and like I traded all of that to do this and repeat. Um, and so I did. I mourned it for quite some time. Even just mourning the teacher lounge and being able to like talk with people and share life together. I love my husband and you get to share life together, but it is so much different talking to a man than it is women. Let's just be honest as women. And so I did. It was happiness to get home and not miss out on the new things, the walking and all the things that I missed not being there in the moment. So that piece there was happiness, but there was a lot of sadness and mourning for quite some time because that's who I always wanted to be was teacher.
And so you mentioned identities, and I know we both co-authored More Than Enough, and we shared through different lenses in terms of the identities that we felt encapsulated the majority of who we showed up as. Um, if I were to ask you, who is Rachel Rector now? Give me top three.
Yeah, so the first one is author or writer. You can kind of interchange that in different ways. I love it. If I could get paid tons of money, that's all I would do. Actually, God has placed multiple children's books on my heart. It's just that's an investment. And so they're not quite there.
Okay.
But I do. I was always that kid that I loved sitting on my mom's lap and listening to books. And then in turn, I loved to read, even though it took me, I didn't learn to read till third grade. That's another story for another day.
Wow.
But I
Okay.
loved, I loved to read. And I always dreamed about being a children's author. But I put that on the back burner because I just thought, well, that doesn't pay well. That's just not, that's not the ideal thing. And so author and writer. Podcaster, which I never thought I would say. I actually have a publisher that pushed me into it because it was part of my package deal. And I was like, I have zero desire. I don't even listen to podcasts. And they're like, okay, well, don't come to this retreat. We'll talk to you in a couple months. Talk to me a couple months. I still have no desire. None. Okay, we'll talk to you in a couple months. And then God definitely got a hold of me and was like, you're doing this.
Mm.
And I remember pushing play, doing my pilot episode. And at the end, I said, I was made for this.
Come on,
So,
yes, she was, girl.
yeah. And then my very favorite, all of them I love, but my very favorite is Freedom Activator. I've always been the
Mm.
person that I will meet somebody on the street. And as long as we're not quickly passing by, I almost daily get, I've never told anybody that story before. And that's just my personality. And
Mm.
so that is my favorite. I'm still trying to sit with the Lord and what exactly does that look like? Obviously through books, and obviously through writing and podcasting, but there's more. There's more coming.
I love that. So I think that's probably the alignment that I felt. So what I reference it as being a discerning spirit, and people are able to discern that you are a safe space.
Mm,
And so you're able to actually draw, and the Bible shares with us that still waters, like out of still waters, like so a man is able to draw out the depth of another man's heart. And I think that that is a gift, right? Like it's not a tangible gift. You can't like write it down and monetize it, but the ability to be able to draw out another human story, that is an absolute gift. And I think as a podcaster, that is situated like right in the heart of what we do, whether we're
hmm
retelling someone else's story or interviewing someone and getting it to draw out. Super powerful. I'm intrigued to know, what does your spouse think of all of this? Because I'm again, I'm in a season of transition,
hmm
and my thought is like, okay, he says he's super supportive, but like, what happens when the checks stop coming and right, the healthcare ends and like,
hmm
so how does your husband receive all of this? What was his reaction and response? Outside of like the normal, like, oh, I support you, baby, like real talk, like, how was his response?
Yeah. So initially, it took him being stay-at-home daddy while I finished out teaching for that year. And in that time, he was like, I am not made for this. Some guys are, and it's amazing, some of those men. But he was like, I am not made for this. Like he's a people, he needs to talk to people daily. And so it God kind of, I guess, softened his heart by seeing that. That's how he let me come home. But the money's different when you stay home, unless you have a spouse that makes tons of money. And that was not us. We just knew we needed to be home. And so becoming an author, that was a lot for him because it's a huge investment. And we actually ended up moving cross country from the Midwest to the East Coast. And it took my husband meeting the people inside of the community and that I was coming alongside and eventually would work for to be able to be like, okay, I understand now. Like, because the Lord had not spoke that over him. I knew we were supposed to move and I knew this is what I was supposed to follow in. But to be married effectively and healthily, you need to hear it together. And so it took that and then just really him seeing me light up. Because writing a book, a solo book, there were multiple days, and I write this in my thank yous to people, is that it took a lot for my husband. There were days he needed to take my kids away, especially when I was homeschooling. I'm one of those. I cannot write when there's noise in there. I can if I'm writing an article, but not an actual book. There were other times when I had to miss things because I was like, I really need to write this chapter if this is going to get done on time. And so he had to go be dad and mom. And so that was really hard. But then now on the other side, when he hears of the people that are impacted, that my book is on bullying and it's a guidebook getting them from being bullied to finding healing. And now that he's seeing the fruit of souls affected by the book,
Mm.
that's, but he still has, oh, what else are you going to do at times, you know? So it's definitely a prayer of, Lord, I know this is what I'm called to, but can you please reveal that to him in the right timing?
Let me write that prayer down. Yes, I
Yeah.
love all of that. So you mentioned this book on bullying. I wanted to slowly segue into the delicious thing that I see behind your head right there. This wonderful, beautiful book on bullying, and I love that it's more of a guidebook
Mhm.
versus a collective of stories. Not that stories aren't powerful, because listen, we're writers, so that we're in the business of storytelling.
Right.
But what do you do? How do you do it? And then like, what does this look like? How does it help? Um, some of my background work is in restorative practices, and the entire community of people, we are all to be safe spaces for everyone, adults to children, children to adults, so that the bullying is either mitigated or is reduced or it doesn't exist at all, right? And that's an all-encompassing, but not every community has that ability. Not every school is willing to do the work of creating restorative practices. So I would love to hear more about what what was your, I guess, the heart behind writing that as your first solo book? Because it sounds like you've had a lot of different experiences and you could have gone a myriad of paths.
Mhm.
Why bullying?
The short answer is that my child was bullied and I drowned as I was trying to figure out how to help her. Even though I was a teacher, there wasn't a book to pick up. And so that's the short answer. The longer
Mm,
answer is the more that I shed light on our story before my actual book came out, I had people coming out of the woodworks that I barely knew to people that I thought I knew really well, and
mm,
they were bullied as a child and or they had a child bullied, and they're like, they were my accountability. They kept saying, "When is your book coming out? I need your book." Like I gave them advice. I gave them the free advice. But it was needed. And I also was a teacher, and I remember feeling like my hands were tied as a teacher because there's so much more I knew that needed to be done and so much more that I wanted to do. But legally or just how the school was structured, I couldn't. And I remember numerous times, sometimes it would irritate my principal, and other times he understood. But I would say, I hear you. I see you, but it would be very helpful if you went to the principal. And I'm not saying to parents, go to the principal. There's a chain of
Right.
roles, and you should start with the teacher. But there was a point where I was like, I can't help in the capacity that I can. But if the principal knew this is what the teacher has done, now we need more would
Mm.
be done, hopefully. And so I wanted to be able to be that. But I also want eventually, and I'm slowly getting in there, is I want this to be in the schools, and it's starting to get in the counseling offices. And with time, I want it to be where the teachers are, that's their extra training that they have, because
Mm.
I have a master's degree in teaching and I have multiple endorsements, but I never once had a class on bullying. It was basically make sure it doesn't happen, but they never gave me the tools on how to make sure it didn't happen. It was more, well, when it happens, if it happens, then this is, the teacher handbook.
So they gave you the practicals on uh, the after, but not like how do you create environments where this shouldn't happen, or
Yes.
your eyeballs are on the first. So they call it preventative
Yes.
versus reactionary. So we got the reactionary training, but not the
Mm-hmm.
preventative training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting because when you mention the idea of feeling like your hands were tied in the classroom, um, I'm wondering, Nikki Giovanni has this quote that says like, if you're looking for a book, right, on a specific topic and you can't find it, go write it. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. My brain is going all over the place because yeah, as a teacher, as a fellow teacher, like I love writing curriculum. So I'm just thinking like, oh, curriculum from this book. Ooh,
Yeah.
and workshops. Ooh, and national conferences. Like my brain is going like 20 miles into the future. But I'm gonna stay right here. Try. Try. So what's next?
Yeah, so I am praying through the next. I am definitely a Moses, and I've trailblazer is always one of my taglines when people get to know me. They're like, "You're a trailblazer," and I am. But sometimes constantly being a trailblazer is exhausting. Even in the teacher realm, when I was an ELL teacher, there was no curriculum. I created my curriculum, and so the trajectory as I step out of feeling like a Moses and I be more like an Abraham and walk in faith is, yes, I want to be in schools. I want to train up teachers. The biggest trajectory is to get into teacher prep schools and be a part of that teacher training. Not necessarily the professor, but I would like to be the person coming in and, that refreshment of, hey, here's some tools and here's a book and those kinds of things. And then I don't believe in coincidence. The Lord plucked me out of Nebraska and put me 3 hours away from Washington, D.C. So that's
Mm,
God's big dream for me that makes me shake in my boots, is changing the trajectory of the education system, at least public school wise. I've done everything. I've had kids in private school. I've taught in public. They've been homeschooled. We've done all of them, and I think they all need it. And my child was actually bullied in a Christian private school. So I know that it's everywhere. But
mm.
my big trajectory is to get in there because there's so much discrepancy. In Nebraska, you have to have legally, you have to have a certain reactive. If this happens, then this will be the consequence, basically, for the person that is bullying, for their family. This is what the school does. This is what you do for the child being bullied. Um, Whereas in Virginia, they legally are supposed to be having yearly training on bullying for their teachers. That's not in Nebraska. There should be. Everybody should be. I've taught for almost 14 years, but it's not. And but we both states are in the United States of America. but it's so black. I feel like it's more black and white here in Virginia, where it's there. It's very loosey goosey, and in Nebraska and Iowa, where I was, there's a lot of they just don't want to say do this, and I think there needs to be for safety. Right? We have so many, and I don't want to stay heavy on there, but there's so many school shootings. And when you get down to the research, a very high percentage, they were bullied and they just had their breaking point. And so we've done, I feel, in the US at least, a good job of securing the schools a little bit better and having more checkpoints to try to have more safety. But there's so much more proactive, and that's one of the chapters in my book. It's for the teachers, it's for the administrators. And like, I get it, it's hard, but here are things that you can do proactively so that you're not putting out fires.
I like the proactive. So what we call it punitive, right? So there's all these things that happen after, like after you do all these bad things, and here's how we're going to respond to you, versus laying a foundation or groundwork that allows the young person to feel seen, to feel loved, to feel heard, so that they don't get to this space of feeling like they have to lash out in violence. I love all that. I love that. Listen, I can sit here and talk to you all day, girl. but it's called 30 Minutes of Power for a reason. So as we land this plane, I would love 3 takeaways you have for anyone who feels called to maybe come out, because you're actually doing a whole circle, right? You in the classroom, out of the classroom, and now God is like, I needed you to come out so you can prepare, start laying the groundwork and the foundation for what I'm going to have you go back and secure and do and fix. Three practicals, 3 takeaways, 3 encouragements that you can give to any educator who's listening to this, and anyone honestly in their job right now where they feel called by God to go out, to be bold, to maybe be a Moses, to leave the comfort, leave the normalcy, and then step out on faith to something bigger than themselves. Because this that you're embarking on, it's bigger than you.
Yeah, the first one would be to really sit with the Lord daily if you can. When you make it about yourself, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall hard. But sitting with the Lord, and something I am really bad at, and I wrote this in my chapter in More Than Enough, that God is still bringing me through, is I need to just be silent. I not come to the Lord in prayer and, hey, this is everything I have, and this is everything that everybody that asked me to pray need. But sitting and being like, what do you have for me today? Because sometimes, and I am definitely sometimes God gives you a vision, but he doesn't want you to activate it for a year, for 5 years, whatever that is. And I'm a futuristic thinker, and so that's hard for me. I'm like, you gave it to me, let's go. And so really sitting down with the Lord. If you're married, you definitely need to bring your spouse back into there. But really sitting down with the Lord and really getting crystal clear and making sure you're not staying in a job just to be comfortable. Because I've been there, and it's easier in the moment, but it's draining in the moment. And so definitely sitting with the Lord. The next thing would be, if you're somebody that you're still trying to figure it out, something that I did is, first of all, what lit you up as a child? What lit you up in the after senior year, those kinds of things, and kind of look at those patterns. Because that, I feel, and you speak in your chapter, they become breadcrumbs as God's leading you. And so really, but also looking at what's your pain points. That was my book. And that's what came about with my book. There was a pain point. It was my child was bullied. And then eventually I have 4 kids. Eventually I had another child bullied, but because I had the tools, it stopped really quickly. And so seeing what those pain points, and then seeing kind of where those intersect, because a lot of times there's a lot of different sayings out there, but a lot of the time what you're going through is eventually what you're going to help somebody else through. And so really seeing where the Lord has brought you through. And I am a firm believer. I do not feel like you have to be fully healed to help somebody else. You just have to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of them in order to help them. And that was when I started my book. My daughter was not fully healed. And I firmly believe you are not fully healed till this side of heaven. You're not healed till heaven, but you can get to a process where you can lay it at the feet. And for me, that was laying the child that chose, or 2 children that chose to bully my child. That was the ultimate healing for me, being able to pray for them. And then from there, just really prayerfully seeing when and where the Lord wants to take you next, and not being afraid to take the step when you don't have all the steps. Because the Bible does say, a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. But what God really had to bang me over the head was, I'm not going to give you a spotlight, Rachel. Sometimes I'm going to give you a candle, and you keep walking, and you keep not looking behind at the distractions, because I'm going to share with you, there are people that are constantly, and they do it out of love most of the time, but they're going to try to tell you to not do it. And I actually have a family member that has come up to me since moving and since writing. And that family member is like, I am so glad you didn't let me stand in the way. I tried to keep you comfortable, and this wouldn't have come to pass, and I wouldn't have got to see your smile, and I wouldn't have got to hear the people that are now free in whatever that was from, because you were able to be vulnerable and share how the Lord brought you through. So that would be mine, sitting with the Lord and being quiet some of the time, really looking at your pain points and the things that light you up, and how does that intersect in those breadcrumbs. And then just really being able to see what next step to come. It doesn't have to be a 5-year vision board. I think some people get so stuck in that, and then they don't hit it, and it's like, I give up. But really, you do need to plan out some, but you really need to leave a lot of room for the Lord to direct you.
Woo, Rachel, that's some good stuff. Girl, all right. Well, you're gonna have to come back. You're gonna have to come back, because we go on this world tour where we ending and eradicating bullying on all parts of the universe. We're gonna have to bring you back so we can get an update on all the delicious things that you're doing in the United States and abroad. Rachel Rector, everybody. God bless you, friend. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your heart, and for sharing those practicals. I think, honestly, it doesn't matter what the transition is. Those practicals, they are applicable to pretty much anything. This is good sound advice. I love it. Listen, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on 30 Minutes of Power. Again, this is Jori O'Neale, Rachel Rector, TOP, and we always encourage everyone to go out and be an empowered woman, using your power to empower others. Till next time, people. God bless. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to 30 Minutes of Power. We hope you found today's episode informative and inspiring. To stay connected with us and continue the conversation, follow us on Instagram at 30 Minutes of Power, or email us at azironsharpensiron@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit our website at azisi.org to learn more about our mission and how you can get involved. Remember, your power can make a difference in the world. Let's be folks out there using our power to empower others.
30 minutes of power.